Is your Genie garage door opener not closing with one of these remote transmitters? How about it's not closing with one of these remote transmitters? Or maybe you have one of those new 3-button remote transmitters and still it's not closing. Will it close if you hold down the wall button on one of these? Or perhaps maybe you have one of those new style wall buttons, or maybe a single wall button. Party people, regardless of what button you're using, whether from the wall or from the remote transmitter, if your garage door opener is not closing, more than likely there's one single culprit that makes this happen all the time, and that is Genie safety beams, or what Genie calls their safety sensors. Hey party people, Santiago SOS Garage Door Service, and the robots at YouTube tell me that 96% of you watching these videos are not subscribers. So let's prove those robots wrong. Consider subscribing, because on this channel we provide you pro tips and tech reviews for all your residential garage door needs. Check this latest one out. And again, we're tackling this subject about photo safety eyes, photo reversing sensors, safety sensors, safety beams, as Genie likes to call it. And we're specifically going to be talking about the Genie product and how the Genie product is very different than the LiftMaster or all the other garage door sensors that exist out there. So let's go ahead and get into it right now. Now, it's important to understand that Genie safety beams, photo safety eyes, safety reversing sensors, are particular to the Genie brand. In fact, there was the old style sensor that Genie had come out a long time ago that basically was a square box. In fact, that specific style of sensor had existed throughout their early line straight through what was probably known up to their 8600 models, and I would say it was right before the 1024 or 2024 model that came out that was just a disaster. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that motor literally stunk. The motor stunk, the sensor stunk, all the aspects of that particular model, the 1024, 1026, 2024, 2026, that motor was just a bad motor. And yet, if you had problems with that motor closing, then you could easily apply the Genie safety beams and it would work like a charm. Now, it's also important to understand that Genie has not really changed their design language to their safety sensors. So if you do have a motor that is 93, or I should say 1993 and on, you should be able to apply the new style safety photo eyes, safety reverse sensors, safety beams. Let's just go ahead and call it what Genie calls it, safety beams. And you can apply it on any of the old style garage door opener motors, which I think is very smart on Genie's part. Much like LiftMaster that uses one safety sensor to rule them all, Genie has decided to also use one safety sensor to rule them all. Now, what makes Genie's safety sensor very different from the other brands? Well, what you get in the package is pretty specific. In fact, the box is all you're going to get. You're going to get safety photo eyes, the safety beams from Genie. It comes nicely packaged, and you're going to get some screws to place it in. Now, unlike the old style sensors were very different. Those old style sensors came with a bracket and the sensor. So it's this bracket and sensor that Genie used to have in their garage door opener motors, and what was really interesting about this is that you had to basically attach it on. So if you ever had a bad sensor and needed to replace this, you could basically buy new sensors and keep the same bracket. Surprisingly though, Genie would always sell brackets with the new sensors, and it never really made sense to me. At any rate, if you have these old style sensors but you still have the bracket, you should be able to use this bracket with this sensor. Goes on as so, and of course you have the terminals there on the back. Now, Genie decided to go away from this, and there was a couple of design flaws that this particular photo safety eyes, photo reversing sensors, safety beams had. Now, you see how this particular eye in the sensor, it's kind of big? Well, what would happen sometimes, especially when it came to the red and green sensor, the green sensor would easily be interfered by sunlight. So if you didn't position your green sensor in a shadowy part of the garage and sunlight would hit it, yeah, you would have problems closing the garage door. In most cases, you could figure this out when your red sensor began to blink. So clearly, if you were able to capture this while your garage door is not closing properly, super easy fix. You just have to snap off the sensor and trade it with the other side. Of course, you're going to release the terminals or unscrew the terminals, take the wires off of that sensor, the green one, put them on the red one, vice versa on the other side. Problem solved. But on the new sensors, it's just not that easy. So on the new sensors, basically you see the brackets are attached onto the actual sensor. No longer could you be able to take them off from these brackets and to be able to switch them or reposition them. You're literally now, if you have that issue where sunlight is hitting the green sensor, you literally now had to basically unscrew them off from the sides or perhaps from the tracks, where you can do it through these holes right here, or if you place it or screw it onto the wall, you would have to take them off and switch them on the other side. Oh wow, I almost hit that right there. Oh, I did hit it. Anyways, and so that's kind of like a difference in the design language, or I should say a design feature or aspect that's changed on some of these new sensors. Now, take a look at how this sensor right here has that little cover, and then you have this sensor that doesn't. You kind of notice that right there? Why is that the case? Well, there was a variation. I guess you could say there was an update or a design change from these sensors to this sensor. And it's important to understand why that's the case, because there was still a flaw in how this sensor was responding. Again, sunlight would hit that green sensor, and if it was not in the most shadowy part of the garage, you were going to have trouble with your garage door closing properly. So Genie decided to go with that little cover right there. This little cover was basically going to alleviate, mitigate. It was going to make sure that that light from the sun was no longer going to affect that green sensor. That's smart on Genie's part. And in fact, it enabled them to have less issues with sunlight interference for those safety beams, infrared eyes, safety reversing sensors, call it whatever you want to call it, so that way the garage could close properly. Now, there was another aspect to this safety photo eye, safety beam sensor that not many people talk about, and compared to the old style sensor that really didn't protrude or stick out so much, these kind of do. So when you're thinking about replacing these sensors, you really want to keep in mind how much space do you have in your corners? Do you have garden tools or perhaps maybe some items that are near these safety sensors? If you do, I highly recommend this pro tip. Move these items away from these specific safety sensors. They are the most sensitive part of your garage door system. In fact, when these items in your garage, such as garden hose, shovels, brooms, or they perhaps maybe fall and get into your track assemblies, or if they hit your sensors, that could easily create a recipe for disaster, because at that point your sensors are no longer communicating with each other, and if that infrared light is not communicating with the other side, or the other sensor with its infrared light meeting the other sensor with its infrared light not communicating, your door's not going to close. As simple as that. Now, again, whether that's great, good, or not, I can't say. It's just a decision that Genie decided to go with on the safety sensors. They protrude out a little bit more. Whether that's bad or not, I'm not really sure, but since they've gone with this type of design language, it's been a lot better, I would say, for most customers. I really don't think they have any trouble now with closing unless they're hit, unless they have some sort of problem with the physical sensor itself or the connecting wire. Now that's another point. So unlike the LiftMaster safety sensors that comes with a little bit of wiring, the Genie safety sensor does not. So what that basically means is that you are forced to use the existing wiring. Now that could be a good thing, and it could also be a bad thing. It could be a good thing because it's a pretty clean job, right? You just basically unscrew from the terminals, screw on the new safety sensors, make sure you apply them properly, make sure that the green sensor is going to have a little bit of a shadow and that it's cleared from any type of items that could obstruct them or could damage them. But if the wiring that is currently installed or in place is damaged, maybe it's rusted, maybe it has a pinch, or perhaps it's failing from the connector to the motor head, well then that means you should replace your wiring. And of course, that's going to take some time, effort, and money to be able to replace. So identify, before installing these sensors, identify if you have good wiring to the existing garage door opener. Make sure that the line of the wire is not pinched and you don't have any problems with it. In some cases, especially in cases where the wiring is inside the wall, I've seen customers who have still had problems while replacing these, and they still had problems, and that was because there was a little creepy crawly or a little creature that was chewing on the wiring in the wall, and that's what created these issues for the customer. So again, Genie does not provide any bell wire, does not provide any wiring to wire your safety sensors. Whether that's a design flaw or not, I can't really say, but I can tell you that if you inspect your wiring that's already installed and it seems good, you should be able to tack these on easily without a problem. Now, last but not least, you should not pay a lot of money for replacing Genie safety beams. In fact, they are pretty inexpensive. You can find them at your local retail hardware store or online. And because they only come with the sensors and some screws to apply onto the track assembly or to the wall, you shouldn't have any problems taking off the old wiring and snapping on the new one. So there is a cost advantage in basically doing this job on your own if you're handy. But if you're not and you don't want to fiddle with this type of stuff, call a contractor, call a professional. They'll be more than happy to help you out with this situation. Now, in addition to that, if you do have multiple doors, the same principle that was applied to the LiftMaster safety sensor, or I should say safety sensors on multiple doors, will apply here. So you have to make sure that you offset your safety sensors if you have 2 doors or 3 doors, so that way you make sure that there's not interference or inter-infrared crossing. So that's a benefit to you. In fact, Genie does a really good job in providing online instructions on how to do that. So if you're paying attention, and again, you're not scared to tackle something like that, you should be able to handle it easier. But if not, call a professional. They should be able to help you and get you taken care of. For years now, Genie has really done a good job in trying to keep their motors pretty similar throughout all their line. In fact, if you had, again, a Genie motor past 1993 that does require photo safety eyes, you would be able to use the new photo safety eyes for their older units. And of course, the new motors that are coming out will require the same safety eyes, the same safety beams. So I think that's really smart, particularly in Genie's case, because they tend to convolute or confuse us with so many product lines. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I see Genie come out with a brand new model of motor. Of course, they do this so that way they can sell a specific model exclusively from one retail chain to another. And that's besides the point. But what I'm trying to point out here is that you shouldn't go wrong, or you shouldn't have a problem finding these safety sensors and applying it to your Genie motor. So that's one thing that I think Genie has done right. Like I said, it is one sensor to rule them all. Now, being able to identify what your motor is should be pretty easy. Just check the date. If it's past 1993 and you see that it has terminals for applying safety beams, you should be good to go. But if you're not sure, then reach out to a professional. They can ask you some questions over the phone and perhaps through some pictures determine whether your garage door opener can be applied with safety beams. That's going to be it for this one, party people. Thank you so much for watching. Now, if you have any questions with regards to Genie photo safety eyes, Genie safety sensors, safety beams, leave a comment down below. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and link my other video on get the right safety sensors on the LiftMaster product, and that'll help you to understand that LiftMaster and Genie are pretty exclusive. What that means is that they won't allow Genie sensors to work on the LiftMaster product. Vice versa, LiftMaster sensors won't work on the Genie product, and that's important to understand. Looks like things are getting noisy over here. And if you found value to this video, please hit that like button, subscribe, and go ahead and smash that notification bell. And we'll see you on the next one. Y'all be safe.